Bloober is mostly known for their first-person horror titles, games that often received mixed responses from both critics and fans. However, the release of the Silent Hill 2 remake marked a turning point, earning the studio widespread praise and proving they were capable of more than many first expected. Now all eyes are on their next project, Cronos The New Dawn. The big question is whether Bloober can maintain this momentum or if Silent Hill 2 was simply lightning in the bottle. Let's take a look at what we know so far, but first, let me tell you a little bit about Bloober Team before the release of Silent Hill 2. Bloober Team is a Polish development studio best known for their first-person psychological horror games. Titles like Layers of Fear, Observer, and Blair Witch have found popularity, especially in the content creation scene. But reactions from players and critics have been overall mixed. While some praise Bloober's psychological storytelling, others criticize the lack of meaningful gameplay, to the point where many of their games are considered walking simulators with an over-reliance on jump scares. The Medium in particular was a divisive release, not just for its slow pacing, but how it mishandled sensitive topics like abuse and trauma, leaving many players genuinely upset. Their new title, Cronos The New Dawn, was recently announced to be coming out on September 5th of this year. We've also had a lot of new information, gameplay footage, and previews regarding the project. In Cronos The New Dawn, we play as the Traveler, a heavily armed agent working for a mysterious company called The Collective. Her mission is to travel back in time from a dystopian future to 1980s communist Poland. She is tasked with locating individuals who died in a mysterious event called The Change, a plague which transformed people into monsters known as orphans and the enemies of the game. Her objective is to extract these people's essence, which is basically their consciousness, and bring them back to the last remaining safe zone in a desperate attempt to secure humanity's future. We don't know why the Collective want the essence or why they are seeking these people in particular, but with humanity at stake, there isn't really any other options but to trust them. Now, if any of you have played horror games or seen horror films, then you know that the big faceless corporations are usually the bad guys in these things. I guess we'll see when the game releases, but I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, the change was caused by the Collective in the first place. The concept of extracting a person's essence reminds me of the plot from Soma. Spoilers for that game, by the way. In that game, which is a first-person horror game developed by the folks who developed Amnesia. Wait, okay, they didn't develop Amnesia, they developed, I hope not, they developed the game, Amnesia.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
People have their consciousness scanned and copied into new bodies to preserve humanity since it's at the brink of extinction. I will go even further and suspect that maybe these individuals are responsible for the creation of the Collective itself, and that's why they want to preserve them. And who knows, maybe the change was a cog in a larger conspiracy. The developers have been very open about their inspirations, namely the Netflix series Dark, which also involves time travel and a lot of mind-bending twists, so I would expect a similar form of storytelling here. They also said that story is going to be a big focus on the game. Gameplay-wise, at first Cronos seems to be very similar to other games in the genre. The game plays in an over-the-shoulder perspective that zooms when you aim. You explore the environment for limited resources and find audio logs and written entries that expand upon the game's story and world. Through the game, players can also uncover logs left behind by a previous traveler who failed their mission. These entries gradually reveal what lies ahead, and I speculate that they will also raise questions that will make you second-guess everything you thought you knew about the story. While the game looks extremely familiar at first, complete with walking through tight passages, safe rooms, and a heartbeat monitor serving as a health bar, Cronos ultimately appears to have a trick up its sleeve, and this comes in the form of the burning mechanic. If you've played Resident Evil Remake or The Evil Within, you'll be familiar with this concept. Basically, enemies come back to life if their bodies aren't burned. This makes every combat encounter feel like a puzzle in of itself, while giving the player an additional layer of strategy when it comes to resource management. It seems that Cronos is taking this concept and running with it. In this game, enemies don't come back per se, What they do is that new enemies can feed on corpses of enemies you already killed and become bigger and stronger, incentivizing the player to burn these bodies so that this doesn't happen. This can quickly turn into a nightmare for the player as fuel is limited. You can also use the burn ability from your suit to escape grapples, as the game doesn't include a dodge system. The fact that Cronos focuses primarily on this is very interesting to me, because it's obvious that this mechanic is something that RE and Evil Within creator Shinji Mikami saw a lot of potential in. I can also imagine how downright intense the game may feel at times, as a new enemy appears in an area you have already cleared, only for them to start feeding on a corpse you thought you had burned. The shooting itself, while it seems like standard fare at first, includes a very important aspect, which is weapon charging. Based on previews like the one from IGN, it seems like firing normally does little damage to enemies and you need to charge every shot to make them count. So an important aspect to the combat appears to be managing a safe distance between you and the enemies while charging your shots and strategically burning enemy corpses. I also want to comment on how cool the weapons sound. Other than this, the game seems to involve the usual puzzles you'd expect in a survival horror game, but this time with a time-traveling twist. There are times where you have to progress by changing things in the environment and making it go back in time by shooting your pistol in designated places. I expect the game will use this mechanic similarly to how Dead Space uses zero gravity in its traversal. I hope the developers can create clever puzzles and scenarios that make full use of this new mechanic. Visually, the monsters seem to be inspired by body horror films, namely The Thing. While they seem a little generic at first, I trust that the merge mechanic will make them interesting to fight. Another thing I absolutely love is how the game uses a retro futurist aesthetic for its visuals, which I'm always a big fan of. Aside from this visual choice, the buildings themselves are inspired by brutalism architecture, a style that emerged during the mid-20th century and is characterized by exposed concrete, geometric block-like shapes, and massive monolithic structures. This architectural style is often perceived as cold and oppressive, which perfectly fits this game's atmosphere. From the previews, it seems that the game is very old school in its difficulty, with very limited resources, enemies that appear to be bullet sponges, and few healing items. This will require the player to be in their A game at all times and make good use of the weapon charging and burning mechanics. I suspect this will turn some players off, but the game is obviously tailored for the biggest fans of the genre, which I'm obviously a part of. Although I'm curious on how the game will be received by general audiences. Overall, I'm cautiously optimistic about Cronos The New Dawn. I absolutely love the Silent Hill 2 remake, and I have faith that Bloober are capable of delivering a good successor to that game. At the same time, I imagine that Team Silent's involvement in that game's development also contributed a lot to its success, so we have to see if Bloober can achieve another victory when left to their own devices. Games like The Medium have been heavily criticized by fans due to its story, and seeing as Cronos appears to focus a lot on storytelling, this could either make or break the game. But here's hoping we'll have a brand new IP in the survival horror genre for years to come.